On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, one ship in 2 centuries? Is that even possible? I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Happy New Year. So welcome to our New Year edition of What's Going On with Shipping. And I want to address a story that comes out every New Year and has a maritime flair to it. That is the story of the SS Warrimoo. Now, SS Warrimoo appears every New Year's because this ship supposedly crossed the Equator and the international date line at a time that propelled it into 2 different centuries at the same moment. It's an interesting story. You'll hear about it all the time. It'll pop up in your social media feeds on YouTube. There's a slew of stories about this. But I thought we'd take a look at it today because, number one, is that even possible? Is it possible for a ship in 1899 or 1900, depending on which part of the ship you're in, to navigate to that level of proficiency? Could we even do it today? If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this story. So I pulled this story up from Big Think, One Ship in 2 Centuries, The Strange Tale of the SS Warrimoo. And this kind of shows you what they're talking about. The ship was sailing from Vancouver, Canada to Sydney, Australia. The master found himself in an opportunity to basically cross the international date line and the equator at the same time, which would have been unique. And so he navigated that way. Now, according to this story, there's a couple of interesting side notes here. So I'm going to fast forward down the story because I want to get to the meat of it here. So, seeing a chance to pull a prank of historical proportions, big enough to be written about more than a century hence, 123 years hence, as a matter of fact, kept John Duthie Sidney Phillips, great name, first off, John Duthie Sidney Phillips, that's, I don't know how much more British, Australian, Canadian you can get, but that's pretty good, ordered his crew to steer the ship toward the meeting point of both lines, so the intersection of the equator and the international date line. 5 experienced navigators checked the position of the sun, and after sunset, the stars. I'm going to talk about why that's an issue in a second. The ship's position was checked every 3 hours. Helped by smooth seas and open skies, the SS Warrimoo at the stroke of midnight found itself right across the aforementioned intersection. Its bow pointed south and its stern facing north. This had some positively mind-boggling consequences. The forward part of the ship in the southern hemisphere, where it was summer, and already January 1st, 1900. The aft part of the ship was in the northern hemisphere, where it was winter and still December 31st, 1899. It could be said, therefore, that the ship was for a brief moment in 2 different days. Its forward half was already Monday, while the aft half was Sunday. 2 different months, January and December. 2 different seasons, summer and winter. 2 different years, 1900, 1899. 2 different centuries. That's if you believe centuries start with the 00 year or not the 01 year. There's no year 0, so therefore the first year of a century is 1. It's not 00, just being technical. And then finally, in all 4 hemispheres at once, the southern and the northern on either side of the equator, and the eastern and southern on either side of the 188th meridian. All right, this poses some great questions right here. So a couple of things. Number one, understand the way you navigate today. You all navigate the same way I navigate, and that is using my phone and my GPS, Global Positioning System. One of the greatest inventions of all time is the smartphone, because one of the things it allows you to do is hook up to a device that is so important and something we take for granted. What time is it? If you had asked people years ago, a decade or 2 ago, what time it is, you would get different answers from everybody depending on when they set their watches to. Today, that's not a problem. Everybody has the same exact time because we're all synchronized on the atomic clocks. And that is part of the GPS system. The way you navigate ships is by celestial or terrestrial bodies. Terrestrial is when you are looking at land features, lighthouses, prominent points, but celestial is using objects in the sky, either the sun, the moon, or a series of navigational stars. And the way GPS works is very simple. Understand, GPS system is an elaborate system, and what we did is replace the stars with satellites. And instead of measuring the angle of the star above the horizon, which you do with a sextant, we are now using time differentials, the time it takes a signal to come from the satellite to your receiver. And using a series of those satellites, you can fix your position on the Earth. It's extremely accurate. It's amazing the detail you have. But let's be clear about something. If you tried to do this today with a GPS on a ship, it would be really tough to do that, because understand, the GPS reads from the antenna where it gets the position from. So you would have to build in where that antenna is on your ship. Now, you could do it. You could really do it. But you're talking about maneuvering a ship out in the open ocean and trying to get it so that it's crossing an invisible point at a set period of time. It is a tough thing to do. I am telling you, this is impossible to do in 1899 and 1900 with the technology that's available. And I'll explain to you why right now. So, number one, this spot they're going to is the middle of nowhere. And I mean literally the middle of nowhere. Understand the scope and scale of the Pacific. When you get looking, there is like nothing out here. You're talking about just a series of small, desolate islands, Howland and Baker Island, Kiribati. There's nothing out here. And so you're not using terrestrial navigation. You're using celestial navigation. You've got to use the stars and the sun to be able to do this. And that's going to pose a lot of problems. So understand how you use a sextant. So the method you use is you measure the angle of the sun or the star from the horizon. And he talked about doing this prior to the event. And so he had 5 navigators out, and they were using sun sights. Now, if it's a clear day, a nice sharp horizon, you can do it. You see right here with the sextant, you point the sextant to the horizon, you raise the angle of the sextant up to the object you want, in this case, the sun, and you see that kind of split lens you're looking through. That's exactly what you see. You get that split lens, and what you want to do is bring the sun or the star or the moon. The moon is the toughest thing to shoot because it's the fastest moving body in the night sky. You bring that object down to the horizon, you rock your sextant left to right, swing it on the horizon, and that gets you your angle. That gets you your angle. But understand, when you do sun fixes, those are what's called a running fix. You're only using one source for your position, and that's the sun. And so you're taking a position from the sun. What you get on your chart is a line. And you're somewhere on that line. And then a few minutes later, you would take another one. And then what you do is you advance that line on your course based on your speed. You have to be able to tell what speed you're going to. Ships in 1899 can't. They can't tell their accurate speed. They can throw a speed log over, have an estimate of the speed, but that could be distorted by current and by wind. And so what you're having is a running fix. It is not an accurate fix. Where you get the most accurate fixes is at nautical twilight, in dawn, and at sunset. Because what you start shooting at that time is not one object in the night in the sky, the sun. You shoot multiple objects in the sky, and these are the celestial navigation stars, a series of 57 stars that pop out first in the evening, and you do this at nautical twilight. This is a few minutes after the sun sets. And the reason you do this is you need, first off, to see the object in the sky, and so navigational stars pop out first in the night sky. Polaris, Regulus, Vega, Pollux, Algol, Bellatrix, they all pop out in the night sky. And then hopefully you can get 2 or 3 is ideal. 3 stars at 120 degrees apart is perfect. And then you take it. The problem is you can only take those navigations usually one at a time. And so you take those measurements, and what you're doing is you're measuring the angle from the sky to the horizon. So you have to be able to see the horizon. And you take it. And so you take those fixes. As many stars as you can, you take those fixes. Now, if you have multiple navigators doing this, that's even better. Usually, if it's just one navigator, you have to adjust for time. If you have multiple navigators, you can basically all take them at the same time. So everybody would be taking the star sights at the same moment. And if you could, you would coordinate it and get your same measurement at the same exact moment. But understand, you need one other thing, and that is the exact time. And not the time where you're at, but Greenwich Mean Time. That time where it is back at Greenwich, which is the center of the world. This is the H5 chronometer. This is John Harrison's invention. If you ever want to read a great book on navigation, I strongly recommend Dana Sobel's book. Here you go, Dana Sobel's book, Longitude. There was a movie made on this, but the book is so much better. Not a big book at all, very quick and readable. But it is the true story of a lone genius who solved the greatest scientific problem of his time, and that is determining longitude. Latitude is fairly easy. You can determine latitude pretty easy. If you have the sun at local apparent noon, when the sun's at its highest point, you know what day it is of the year, you can determine your latitude right there. If you see Polaris in the night sky, you can find Polaris in the night sky in the northern hemisphere. You can determine your latitude. If you can find the Southern Cross in the southern hemisphere, you can determine your latitude. The problem has been longitude. Latitude is north to south from the equator to the poles. Longitude is around the planet. And longitude was always a tough because you need the accurate time. Most time measurements prior to the mid 1700s was by pendulum clocks. Pendulum clocks don't work on a ship. As you rock around, pendulums don't work. You need something you can wind. And more importantly, what a chronometer does is it doesn't keep time accurately, but if it loses time, it loses it at a set rate. So that you can determine, by measuring your chronometer with a measurement of local apparent noon at a set position, you can determine the error of your chronometer. And with an exact time, and now those angles and measurements, you can determine your position. So as Warrimoo was moving at sunset that evening of December 1st, 1899, if the captain had multiple navigators going, they would have determined their exact position at sunset, which is great. They would have had it right then, their position. But understand, by the time they calculate that, they've already moved on. They're already sailing a distance past that. And this is the thing about celestial navigation. What GPS tells you is where you are right now. It's constant. It tells you exactly where you are. Navigation, terrestrial and celestial, tells you where you've been. And so what you're doing from the point forward is dead reckoning. And they would have been dead reckoning. Now, he says that in the next, every 3 hours after sunset, they started taking measurements. Now, this is where I call bull on this, and for a very good reason. This is a site that gives you the moon phase for Monday, January 1st, 1900. The current moon phase for January 1, 1900 is the new moon phase. On that day, the moon is 0.21 days old and 0.08% illuminated. What that means is it was a dark night the night they went across that position, which means you would not be able to see the horizon. If you cannot visualize the horizon, you can't be taking star fixes or moon fixes. You just would not be able to see it. Usually you need the moon out to give you a silhouette of a light. If not, you're getting false horizons. And this is why I tend to lean to the fact here that I severely doubt that a ship in December of 1899 could determine its position to such a degree of accuracy after their last sunset fix and determine that they are crossing the equator and the international date line by controlling their speed and getting them so their bow is in one hemisphere, their stern is in the other hemisphere, and they're crossing not just a line, but an X in the middle of the ocean. I just think that this is an apocryphal story that is great. It's a lot of fun to talk about, but I just think it's an impossibility with the technology that was at play at this time period. Navigation was not that accurate or wasn't that updated. You didn't have a constant update. You were continually getting your position and then navigating from that position forward on dead reckoning. So basically you knew where you had been at a previous period, and then you would update your charts and move along. But you were always kind of dead reckoning, especially when you're out in the middle of the ocean and there's no sights, there's nothing to take bearings or land off of, especially on a dark night where there's absolutely no moon. Also, think about it. You got to find those navigation stars, which are now clouded with other stars that are out there, which are difficult to find. I will tell you, it's really difficult. You can find them in the night sky, but getting your sextant on those stars and making sure you have that same exact star to bring down the horizon, that is almost impossible to do. Was Warrimoo in the position? Yeah, they were in the close position. They did pass from December 31st, 1899 to January 1st, 1900, but I don't think they were crossing it at midnight at that exact period. I think that this part of the story is not true. So hope you enjoyed our little bit of navigation here. If you did, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a thumbs up, and if you can, contribute to the page. You can do that by hitting the super thanks button below or heading over to Patreon and become a patron of the page. Until our next video, this is Sal signing off.